What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the Alto again, and this time we technically return, with Gus G of the Almighty Firewind. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for being here today, man, and great to be able to talk with you for more than 2 minutes.
Thanks for having me. Good
Yeah.
to see you again, Alex.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Yeah.
It most certainly has been a while, but it's so awesome to have you here because this new album, Stand United, absolutely powerful and absolutely kick-ass. Was there sort of like a preconceived vision of what you wanted Stand United to sound like? Was there sort of like a sound you were trying to achieve or a goal, or was the follow-up to the self-titled meant to just kind of roll with the dice and kind of let things fall into place?
No, we had a good idea what we were going for. I had a chat with my record label right before we started writing some songs, and I had some demos laying around and stuff, but they said, you should focus on singles nowadays because that's where the whole business is shifting, like on digital singles. And of course, you're gonna do the album, but they were telling me this is what they were telling me. Like, think of it as more like, yeah, let's release singles for like a year, and then eventually those singles become part of an album. We put those singles and then you add some more songs. And that got me thinking, like, okay, if we're gonna go into doing that, since the business model is changing so much nowadays, if we're gonna go about doing that, I was thinking, well, every song should be able to stand on its own pretty much. So I deliberately went into, well, at least in the back of my mind, like I wanted to have really strong, high energy tracks for the most part, and try to make metal songs that can be played like live in an arena, in a festival, in a club, like in anywhere, something that'll get them headbanging, get them going. So that was the first thing that was on my mind. And then, of course, another thing that I wanted the band to sound fresh. That's always the question I ask myself. Like, what do I want Firewind to sound like today? Like, does Firewind have anything to say in 2024, like 20 years later or 22 years later? Which is a good question to ask yourself when you've been doing it for so long.
And Stand United is a message we need now more than ever. So.
Yeah, man. Like lyrically, if we go into that thing, I know it's a little bit of a utopic type of statement, but like if you really think about it, it's such a crazy world. And like all we have is each other, basically.
Well, and I always said that you made a fucking kick-ass album when the hardest part is picking the single. Because whether I'm listening to Salvation Day or Destiny is Calling, Come Undone, Day of Grace, Land of Chaos, it really seemed like every song flows into each other very, very perfectly. But has there always been like a formula in a way? Because when I listen to albums such as Forged by Fire or Burning Earth or Days of Defiance, it seems like that there is sort of like a lot of there's a Firewind sort of formula, but there is sort of like each album playing by its own rules. So I think you kind of like got the best of both worlds with it.
You could say that, like when it comes to like track listing or how an album like flows. Is that what you mean? Yeah. Somebody else was mentioning that the other day that I was talking. Said, "Oh, your track number 2 is your usual track number 2 is like a power metal song." I'm like, what? I don't know. Maybe that thing lives subconsciously in my head. And somebody else was saying, "Oh, you made a cover and you put it at position number 9, track number 9, just like you did with Maniac back on the Premonition album." So
people have a lot of time on their hands to notice things like that.
But they do, and they tell me things like that, which is kind of nice. That means somebody's paying attention and they remember the old albums. And but stylistically, like, it's still a Firewind record, just like any of our records. It's not like you're gonna be super surprised when you listen to this one, but I think there's small injections here and there of like other elements, things that somehow keep it fresh. So that was the big task for me, how to keep it fresh,
Well, being such a prolific artist, between Firewind and, playing with Dream Evil and, Mystic Prophecy and Night Rage and, playing with Ozzy and so much, like, Has the methodology or the creative process or just the energy, does it change depending on what project you're playing with? Or do you have kind of like a method behind the madness that applies to everything that you play?
Well, it really depends. I mean, there's a certain way how I do things. How I record. My sound, my gear, all those things. How I construct my guitar parts when I go into a session, whether it's for my own band or another band, or it's a guest solo, whatever. But the thing is, like, you always have to treat the music of for what it is. Like, you have to see what is a song that you're playing for, like you're writing guitars for. What is the song about? What's the vibe of it? And you adjust to that, and then you try to bring your own thing to the table. That's how I go about it.
Does the inspiration kind of like strike out of the blue in a way? Does inspiration always strike at inconvenient times, or do you kind of have like a usual place that you go to in order to cultivate different ideas?
You mean about writing songs in general?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like sometimes, like some of the riffs that I write just come out of improvising, just picking up the guitar and noodling around, and then you stumble across something by accident. You're like, oh, what's this? And then that becomes something. And other times, I'll hear something in my head. I'll just pick up the guitar and I'll play it, and those are the songs that sort of write themselves. It's something that just inspiration strikes, and those songs can be written very fast. And those are the easiest ones to make. And usually they're pretty good. And then there's some songs that take more time. You have a good riff, but then you don't know how to continue that. And then you have like a half-finished demo sitting on your computer for like 10 years. And then all of a sudden, oh, I got a chorus idea like 10 years later.
Does that happen often?
It happens, man. It happens quite a lot, actually. Like you'll be surprised. Some of the ideas, like I was just trying to go back and think on the stuff how I wrote this record, and there's a part on a song called Chains. We just put it out as a single, by the way, last week. And the melody, like the solo part, the melody is something I wrote when I was 18, 19 that I recently discovered on some old 4-track tape. And I had that melody. I'm like, wow, why didn't I ever use that? Like usually you don't want to reuse or like rehash stuff that you wrote when you were a teenager because it's kind of not good. Mm-hmm. but that one like was a really cool melody. And it struck me. I was like, wow, it's nice to listen to this. Like, I don't know, 25 years later. And I just used it. I put that part in there. Like the after the second chorus, there's like this guitar melody, like bridge part that comes. And that's like something that I wrote when I was 18.
I always feel bad though, like for artists who do like take off and like have like their biggest album when they are 18, because let's be real, every artist looks at their earlier stuff with cringe and they just don't want to like anything to do with it. But imagine like your biggest hit comes out when you're a teenager, and then like the audience looks at the stuff you put out after with cringe. It's such a catch-22. Am I wrong?
Oh, no, you're right. I mean, you should. I definitely believe that you should try and build it up to get to a point, like where you establish it and you're like, okay, now I made my magnum opus. But it's always a trick. Like it's a double-edged sword. If you have like a big hit with a debut album, and then what after that? There's I don't know.
Yeah. Like or a better example, not a debut album, but AC/DC with Back in Black, one of the most classic rock albums of all time. But they've grown up quite a bit since they put out that album. They put out a lot of albums since then. Do they look back at some of the most classic songs in history with the same kind of cringe that we look at as our work from our younger self?
I don't know. AC/DC is an example of a band that pretty much all their albums sound samey,
I never really thought of that because I love the Bon Scott era AC/DC. Like one of my favorite AC/DC songs is a ballad that they put out, "Ride On," and like like I wouldn't say like you could. I feel like there is sort of a distinction between Bon Scott era and Brian Johnston.
Yeah, there is,
era.
of course. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
so
I can hear that.
yeah, I think there's a lot of, and this isn't a knock on death metal. I'm a diehard death metal fan, but I think that you could easily say that that has more of the sort of samey effect than AC/DC.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's I don't know how others feel about it. I mean, I do like if I look back on my catalog. Of course, I'm not happy with all the early stuff, but I like to look at albums as a snapshot of myself at a certain time. You know what I mean? Like, okay, here's where I was when I was 22 or 23, and I guess that's what was going on in my head. And this is how I could play. And it's like it's on that album there now, and I can appreciate that more now. Maybe when I was a little bit younger, I was I was a bit more negative about things like that. I would be like, oh no, not that one.
Well,
that album was shit.
As artists, we say things to ourselves that we wouldn't say to our worst enemy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But it's funny that you mentioned that too, because like I feel like Burning Earth, right? That's obviously that came out in 2003. It's a fantastic album. I love that album. But I didn't discover Firewind until I was much older, till I was like 18, and I was like 8 or 9 when Burning Earth came out. So like for me, like when I listen to Burning Earth, it doesn't take me back to 2003. It takes me back to 2012, around that time. You know what I mean? So I feel like that kind of has like a time relative thing as well.
But that's the thing, that's the beautiful thing with music, man. It's like it is a soundtrack to our life, to certain, like you will associate yourself with a certain album at the certain time that you heard it. And if it's like the first album that you listen from a specific band, that will always be that your entrance to that, your entry to that, to your introduction to that, to a specific band. And that might not even be their best album.
Yeah.
So we all have those kind of things, So
yeah. I'm a big fan of In Flames, and when I tell them like, "Oh, I discovered you through a sense of purpose, not Colony or Clayman or Horror."
Oh,
like,
really?
And I will die on that hill. That is my favorite In Flames album. I don't care how many dislikes I earn on this video from saying that. But like when I tell people that, they're like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's what I discovered In Flames on." And who knows, if I discovered them on Clayman or Horacle, maybe I would have been scared away. So at that time,
like for me, I first heard of them when they were making Horacle.
Okay.
But then again, I'm older than you, so
yeah,
that plays a big role.
Fair enough. I also heard you reference this term, and I try to avoid the whole genre thing, but I really wanted to have this conversation because you mentioned power metal, and I was just wondering what makes a power metal band a power metal band, because like I think all metal sounds very powerful, whether it's Cannibal Corpse or whether it's Motley Crue. I think metal sounds powerful to me. And like a lot of the bands, we have an idea that power metal may sound like Dragon Force or Sonata Arctica or Blind Guardian, but like they have a lot of similar elements to Judas Priest and Iron Maiden, which I know were not called power metal at that time. So like what's your take on that whole power metal?
Dude, I'm the wrong guy to ask because I've been wondering that myself for many years. I'm like, why is power metal called power metal? And why, like I said, why isn't, like, does that mean that the rest of metal genres are less powerful?
Yeah.
Oh, man. But I don't know. Who came up with that term anyways?
I don't know. Like, I have an idea of what metalcore sounds like. I have an idea of what black metal or death metal sounds like. They have their own distinct things, but power metal, it just seems like it's more like something that the music has more than what the music is.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it has to do with that fast double bass that was, you know what I mean? Like that kind of fast double bass on the drums that made people say, oh, it's power metal because maybe the powerful fast drumming. I don't know. What do I know? But like to me, a lot of the power metal bands, they're more like fantasy metal because a lot of their lyrics is about, I don't know, Lord of the Rings and killing dragons and swords and things like that. Like I never thought of us as too much of a power metal band. We have some, we're leaning a lot towards that in some of our songs, but I always thought of us just like as a heavy metal band.
I think you guys are a traditional heavy metal band that needs no
Yeah.
explanation. So I was just
And I would even say some of our songs is hard rock too. Like we're always like walking that fine line with that hard rock side of us, but we're always more into the metal side, of course.
yeah, of course. But like, it's funny because people hear the word Firewind too, and like if I tell somebody about Firewind and they've never heard of you guys, they'll think, oh, do they sound like power metal in a way just by that title alone? You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, but maybe the name, maybe that's why they tagged us like that early on.
I just sarcastically say you guys sound like Earth, Wind, and Fire without the Earth. So.
There you go.
Yeah. but also collaborating with a lot of different artists too, because I could always tell that you have your own solo in it when you collaborate with many different artists and you're featured on many different songs. But have you ever had to like maybe adjust your technique or maybe adjust your tuning or adjust sort of like your creative process if you're collaborating with a different artist versus doing your own solo endeavors or your own projects?
Really depends. I mean, when I recorded the Scream album for Ozzy, that was like a big thing there where like, what do I do there? Because you can't just go in there and like play on an Ozzy record and do all the stuff that I would do in Firewind without really thinking about it. It's a different, you're playing on a record for a very big artist that has a certain history of guitar players. So there's definitely that kind of ghost of guitar players past haunting during the the recording sessions.
Yeah.
But no, but you have to just play what's best for the song. That's how I approach it. I just try to play what's best for the song, and at the same time, it's important to be yourself, not try to be somebody else. And because at the end of the day, that you want people to recognize your playing, of course, when they hear you. But you don't also want to overplay in places that it's not needed. You have to play the right notes. It's just hard to explain, to put into words. What are the right notes? I don't know. I hear usually a piece of music and then I try to think what that would be like, and I improvise over it and try to give it my best shot.
You most certainly succeed with that, I must say. But like when it comes to songwriting and you're playing this and as you mentioned like noodling around alone, but then you're playing with a band on a live show, does that almost feel like it's a completely different game altogether when you're alone in your own element versus in the company of your bandmates or the audience?
Well, you have the band dynamics there on stage. It's a different beast. Studio from stage is totally two different worlds. And a lot of people have told us that Firewind is a band that has a totally different energy, much more raw energy on our live show. We sound more raw and much heavier than we do on the records. And I believe that. I know what they mean because I haven't heard that only just once or twice. People have been telling me that for like years and years. And I believe that. And I think that has to do, it's a different thing making the record and it's a different thing taking those songs on stage. And maybe also because we are from a generation that we didn't really grow up in the same neighborhood and jamming in a garage for years. My generation is also like file exchanging and sending MP3s and whatever and sending files and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
That's because like back then also there were people asking like, so how do you rehearse? Well, we don't really rehearse until it's time to go on tour, like, and we'll do like a couple of rehearsals and then we'll play a tour. And then once you've done like 80 shows, you don't need rehearsals anymore.
Of course, of course. And like the whole file sharing thing is just a way of doing things. I like telling like Gen Zers or whatever that like I'm an old school listener. Okay, I use MP3s. Back in my day, if you wanted the bonus track, you had to buy the whole album on iTunes.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's old. But when it comes to like stage presence and crowd interaction, is that almost something you can also practice in a way? Like, is that, or does that just have to come naturally as you play more and more and more?
I think both. Like for us when we started, it's like it takes about 30 or 40 shows to find your way around stage, you know, like see what it is, the dynamics with the band, within the band, how to handle the audience. You know, you find things about yourself, about your bandmates. So that's why I always tell bands, like, you should play a lot of shows first, you know, or always before, like, like, if you're like a studio project that has some kind of success and then you never played live, it's going to be tough to tap into that world. So it's important to play shows. Doesn't matter, you know, play small bars, doesn't matter, you know, anywhere. So I think this is something that you need to do in order to find yourself, what your stage presence is like, what your stage show is, and then also you can reevaluate what it is that you want it to be. Well, like, what don't you like about what you're doing, how you can better that, and eventually you build upon that. And when you get to a professional level, even then, you know, we still try to better our show every time. You know, then there will be like eventually some parts that you'll accidentally choreograph, or maybe some bands do that on purpose, and that's also creates a more, you know, it gives it a more powerful visual to the whole, you know, to the whole performance. So there's some tricks you can do, some things you can do, and of course, you know, gimmicks, blah blah blah, all those things. But ultimately, you should be able to learn your parts well, rehearse your parts, make sure you play them well, and once you have that down, then you're able to interact with the audience. Because if you don't feel well about how this, you know, if you're not 100% with what you play, you cannot really look around and to see what's happening in the room. You cannot really feel the energy.
Yeah, and there's no point, like, because if you can't play, like, the audience isn't gonna want to interact with you anyway. So.
Yes, yeah. So it's important to rehearse a lot and then play a lot and then just build upon that.
Is there always sort of like a pre-show like exercise? I'm sure like people have asked you this before, but like, is there almost kind of like, I've noticed that a lot of musicians, especially when they tour for so long and touring has become routine, everybody kind of has like their pre-show sort of ritual, if you will.
For me, yeah, it's just very basic stuff. I just try to keep it quiet backstage. You know, I mean, we just hang out with the band, with the guys in the room. I'll just play a little bit of guitar, do my warm-ups, you know, run the scales, do all those things, get my hands warmed up. And basically what we do is that's like an hour before the show, we just get together and we hang out, we shoot the shit, and we just get in the zone, get in the mood. You know, you get into your stage clothes and then off you go.
And you led me into the final question, because on a technical level, like when I listen to your solos, it sounds very studied in a way. Like it sounds very technical. Is a theoretical background, is that something you're even thinking about when writing the music in a way? Or do you know, this is rock and roll, it's all about breaking rules anyway, so like, do you not even acknowledge that?
I do construct my solos. They're all, you know, they're not improvised. I do construct them part by part. But I don't think in theoretical terms when I play, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Like I just try to go after sounds that I'm hearing and what I think should be, you know, it should be there. Try to play the right notes, like I said. And then I just to take after take, and then eventually I'll stumble upon parts that I like and put them all together, piece them all together, and that's how I construct my solos.
Do you prefer to maybe have like a background music or like a rhythm progression already before like so you know like what key to play in or what notes are not going to work beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about like playing over the backing track. Like when I know like I have 16 measures solo and okay, what's the back track? It's an F sharp, whatever. And it's a minor key and then it goes into this. Then, I mean, I know the basic theory of it. Like, okay, I know it's an F sharp or it's an A or E or whatever. It's in this key and then it's, okay, so I know what my options are like automatically. Like I can play this in this scale. And then from there, I'll just experiment, you know, I'll try to figure out some other passing notes, things like that. And, you know, I'll just do a lot of takes, like a lot of takes. And sometimes it's yeah, it's a bit too much. You need to walk away from it and then come back another day and finish it. But yeah.
I never understood how some artists can do that. How you could just put something aside and come back to it, because don't you kind of like want to keep the emotion that you channel into it consistent in a way, and you're not going to feel the same day the next same week.
It's happened to me that I just ran out of fuel, basically. Like I've done too many takes, and then the mojo is gone, and it's not there anymore. And then, what do you call it? Like almost like beating a dead horse is what they say. And then that's when you realize, okay, after a while, your fingers start hurting, and you're like, okay, well, I should probably. I mean, it's not a happy place when that happens. I hate myself when that happens, and I think I'm the worst guitar player on earth. But it happens, not often, but it has happened to me. Yeah. And then usually, like, I'll go back the next day and then clean, fresh. Like you wake up fresh. Your ears are not so they're not so beaten up, like from listening over and over again, and then it comes to you.
Well, and I could most certainly tell you are not the worst guitar player in the world.
No, it's like I'm just saying, like it's a feeling that you're like, okay, I'm useless. Why can't I get this right? I know I can play it, but why don't I play it? Yeah. It can happen.
Yeah. Again, you say things to yourself you wouldn't say to your worst enemy. But so before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. Most of all, though, thank you for more new music that is just continuing to kick ass and keep heavy metal alive. Is there just anything else with Firewind that you'd like to promote with the release stuff, Stand United, in terms of upcoming shows, or anything else that you're allowed to talk about at this moment, of course?
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, yeah, thanks for the opportunity. And, we'll be coming to the States. We're April and May, we're doing our first headline tour in over a decade. And I think you're in New York, right? Yep. So we're kicking it off in Jersey. So we're doing this. We're doing 20 shows in America, in Canada. So we're gonna have Edge of Paradise and Immortal Guardian with us. So fantastic. Yeah, man, check out the new album. Hope to see everybody out there on the shows. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing you. That's a kick-ass lineup too. Thank you so much.
Right on.
We are here with Gus G of the almighty Firewind. Stand United. Be sure to pick that up. We'll see you next time on Heavy New York.